public is being conditioned to watch the skies for missiles. This is a strategic misdirection. The U.S. Navy's own missile briefing reset is an admission of systemic failure. The era of symmetric deterrence is over. The primary vector of attack is no longer kinetic, it is silent. The new battle space is defined by asymmetric economic warfare. The Ukraine-Palantir AI partnership demonstrates the blueprint. Cheap, AI-guided drones can neutralize multi-billion-dollar assets. The kinetic cost of victory has inverted. A hegemon can be bled to insolvency without a single army crossing its borders. The critical vulnerability is not the military, but the data infrastructure that underpins the entire financial system. RUSI and CSIS analysts have modeled the scenario: a coordinated severing of key undersea fiber optic cables. Not an explosion, but an outage. A systemic liquidity freeze triggered by a handful of unmanned submersibles. Simultaneously, a satellite blinding campaign renders GPS and high-frequency trading inert. This is the kill switch. Stripped of its data feeds and its global sensor grid, the Leviathan is rendered blind. It cannot command its forces, track its assets, or access its own markets. Its advanced weaponry is useless without the network. This is the Blind Leviathan Protocol, a systemically fragile power hollowed out by internal economic liabilities, as warned by figures like BlackRock's Fink, cannot absorb this shock. When it is cornered, deaf, and blind, its strategic options narrow to one. It will not negotiate. It will escalate to the only domain where it retains absolute dominance, a final kinetic solvency play. The conventional narrative is a lie. States do not initiate systemic conflict from a position of strength. They do it to manage a solvency crisis. As analysts at CSIS document, an unpopular war becomes a domestic liability, a non-performing asset on the national balance sheet, consuming capital and political stability. Simultaneously, the battle space becomes a negative yield environment. The kinetic cost of symmetric state-on-state warfare is unsustainable against a new protocol. We have the data. Reports on the Ukraine-Palantir AI partnership reveal the mechanism. Ukraine is leveraging low-cost, AI-driven drone systems to neutralize high-value Russian assets. This is the blueprint for modern attrition warfare. Each drone represents a microtransaction, bleeding a superpower's liquidity. The math is irrefutable. A $5,000 drone neutralizing a multi-million-dollar asset is an economic kill chain that no conventional force can survive. When the state is being drained by internal liabilities and can no longer afford to win symmetrically, it is forced to pivot. Weakness mandates a shift to asymmetric tactics to offset its kinetic and financial deficits. This is not a choice. It is a mathematical function of a failing system. The central liability of the modern hegemon is not its ideology. It is its balance sheet. The entire economic model of legacy military dominance has been inverted. Analysis from institutions like the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, quantifies this inversion with terrifying clarity. A $5 million main battle tank can now be neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not warfare. It is an economic arbitrage on kinetic lethality. For every dollar the asymmetric actor spends, the legacy power must spend $10,000 in defense, a mathematically unsustainable ratio. This is the democratization of violence. The same AI revolution that BlackRock's CEO warns will hollow out the professional class is now hollowing out the professional military. The high-tech, low-cost tools of proxy warfare, validated in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict, have eliminated the barrier to entry for projecting systemic damage. It grants non-state actors and second-tier powers a lethal leverage point previously reserved for superpowers, creating a solvency crisis for conventional armies. The global battlespace is no longer defined by geographic borders. It is a distributed network of proxy laboratories. These are not sovereign states in crisis. They are designated gray zones, engineered to test military and economic attrition models. Reports from analysts at RUSI and CSIS identify these zones as the primary staging grounds for asymmetric warfare, where the kinetic cost of engagement for a legacy power is designed to be systemically ruinous. The blueprint for this protocol is public record. The Ukraine Palantir Brave One data room partnership is not just a wartime alliance. It is a proof of concept for AI-driven, low-cost proxy warfare. This model counters conventional forces with algorithmic targeting and swarms of disposable drones. Simultaneously, internal documents from the U.S. Navy reveal a missile briefing reset, a clear admission that the cost curve of symmetric, high-platform naval competition is breaking. This external military bleed is compounded by an accelerating internal solvency crisis. At the World Economic Forum, BlackRock's CEO warned that the AI revolution threatens to deepen inequality and hollow out the professional class, accelerating the very instability that began after the Cold War. This is not a social observation. It is a balance sheet liability. A nation with decaying social cohesion and massive internal wealth disparity cannot finance a multi-front, high-cost proxy war indefinitely. The gray zones are therefore the mechanism. They are attrition traps. In these laboratories, a hegemon is forced to deploy billion-dollar assets against thousand-dollar threats, while its domestic economic base erodes. This isn't a strategic blunder. It is a mathematical vector. Even peripheral friction, such as Greenland warning of potential conflict, must be analyzed as a potential new proxy zone for resource competition and logistical attrition. The mathematical certainty is this: when the cost of asymmetric containment exceeds a nation's financial solvency and symmetric victory is impossible, the system demands an escalation to a domain of absolute leverage. The next 12 months, the primary indicator will not be fleet movements. It will be the establishment of another AI-driven warfare partnership in a new gray zone, signaling the opening of another financial bleed. This is the final countdown to a solvency play executed via launch-on-warning protocols. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a strategy. It is a systemic tripwire. It is a protocol built to solve a simple mathematical problem. An incoming nuclear strike travels faster than human decision-making. The doctrine dictates that a retaliatory strike must be launched upon detection of an enemy launch, before those incoming warheads can destroy your own arsenal. It is a pre-programmed, kinetic response to a zero-sum solvency crisis. Use your assets or lose them permanently. However, the protocol was designed for a symmetric threat model. The new vector of attack is asymmetric and non-kinetic. As demonstrated by the proliferation of AI-driven systems in modern conflicts like the Russo-Ukrainian War, the battle space is now digital. A cyber attack, costing fractions of a single missile, does not need to target a silo. It targets the data feed. This initiates what analysts at CSIS and RUSI term the fog of digital war. The commander's early warning displays go black. The satellite and radar feeds are severed. They are now systemically blinded, facing a binary choice based on an absence of information. Is it a technical glitch, or is it a deliberate blinding maneuver preceding a full-scale decapitation strike that is already in the air? The launch protocol forces the conclusion. In a state of induced blindness, the absence of data becomes the data. The doctrine's logic compels the commander to assume the worst-case scenario is in progress. Fear, not of the enemy, but of total asset liquidation, forces the launch decision. The asymmetric cyber weapon has achieved the ultimate leverage, forcing a full, kinetic, and irreversible response from an enemy it never physically touched. The protocol of asymmetric escalation is not a theory. It is a mathematical function of insolvency. The proliferation of cheap, AI-driven drone warfare, proven effective by Ukraine's Palantir partnership, has rendered conventional symmetric warfare a negative-yield investment. The kinetic cost of destroying a target now exceeds the target's value. This is a terminal diagnosis for a hegemon built on military dominance. Simultaneously, the system rots from within. BlackRock's CEO warned the global elite at Davos that the AI revolution threatens to deepen inequality and hollow out the professional class, creating an imbalance that cannot sustain social stability. This is not a warning, it is a balance sheet entry, an internal liability that makes long-term, low-grade conflict unwinnable. When a system can no longer win symmetrically and is being bled dry asymmetrically, it is forced to escalate to a domain of absolute dominance. The U.S. Navy's missile briefing reset is an admission of this reality. CSIS reports confirm the strategic vector is shifting from carrier groups to the subsurface battlespace, targeting the nervous system of global commerce. Subsea data cables. The next phase requires a calibration shot, an event designed to test adversary response times and systemic fragility without direct attribution. It is a controlled demolition to gauge the blast radius before the main charge is set. The target must be critical, but deniable. The damage must be economic and psychological, not overtly kinetic. Within the next 12 months, expect a multi-day data blackout originating from a physical severance of a critical subsea cable cluster. The event will be attributed to a seismic anomaly or a deep-sea commercial accident. The true signal will be received by a handful of actors who understand it was a solvency play, a demonstration of final leverage.